Could it all be a bad dream or a nightmare? Is it my imagination, or have we lost our minds? It's surreal. It's just not believable. A grand absurdity, a great deception, a delusion of momentous proportions. Based on preposterous notions and on ideas whose time should never have come. Simplicity, grossly distorted and complicated. Insanity, passed off as logic. Grandiose schemes built on falsehoods with the morality of Ponzi and Madoff. Evil described as virtue. Ignorance pawned off as wisdom. Destruction and impoverishment in the name of humanitarianism. Violence, the tool of change. Preventive war is used as a road to peace. Tolerance delivered by government guns. Reactionary views in the guise of progress. An empire replacing the republic. Slavery sold as liberty. Excellence and virtue traded for mediocrity. Socialism to save capitalism. A government out of control. Unrestrained by the Constitution, the rule of law, or morality. Bickering over petty politics as we collapse into chaos. The philosophy that destroys us is not even defined. We have broken from reality, a psychotic nation. Ignorance with a pretense of knowledge replacing wisdom. Money does not grow on trees, nor does prosperity come from a government printing press or escalating deficits. We're now in the midst of unlimited spending of the people's money, exorbitant taxation, deficits of trillions of dollars spent on a failed welfare warfare system, an epidemic of cronyism, unlimited supplies of paper money equated with wealth, a central bank that deliberately destroys the value of the currency in secrecy, without restraint, without nary a whimper. Yet, cheered on by the pseudo-capitalists of Wall Street, the military-industrial complex, and Detroit. We policed our world empire with troops on 700 bases and in 130 countries around the world. A dangerous war now spreads throughout the Middle East and Central Asia. Thousands of innocent people being killed as we become known as the torturers of the 21st century. We assume that by keeping the already known torture pictures from the public's eye, we will be remembered only as a generous and good people. If our enemies want to attack us only because we are free and rich, proof of torture would be irrelevant. The sad part of all this is that we have forgotten what made America great, good, and prosperous. We need to quickly refresh our memories and once again reinvigorate our love, understanding, and confidence in liberty. The status quo cannot be maintained considering the current conditions. Violence and lost liberty will result without some revolutionary thinking. We must escape from the madness of crowds now gathering. The good news is the reversal is achievable through peaceful and intellectual means, and fortunately, the number of those who care are growing exponentially.
You can at least let sick people have marijuana because it's helpful, but compassionate conservatives say, well, we can't do this. We're going to put people who are sick and dying with cancer, and they're being helped with marijuana if they have multiple sclerosis. The federal government's going in there and overriding state laws and putting people like that in prison. Why don't we handle the drugs like we had alcohol? Alcohol is a deadly drug. What about the real deadly drugs are the prescription drugs? They kill a lot more people than the illegal drugs. So the drug war is out of control. I fear the drug war because it undermines our civil liberties. It magnifies our problems on the borders. We spend, like, over the last 40 years, $1 trillion on this war. And believe me, the kids can still get the drugs. It just hasn't worked.
We have had a mind programming exercise called the War on Drugs for the last 40 years, which has been designed to create an internal enemy in our societies and convince people that there are these evil, wicked groups who are doing these terrible, sinful things, smoking these drugs and doing this and that. And there's a very dark image has been created around it, and people get very upset irrationally about this whole issue. And actually what's been forgotten in all of this, and for me has become, I regard it as an extremely important issue, is that when the state sends us to prison for essentially exploring our own consciousness, this is a grotesque abuse of human rights. It's a fundamental wrong. If I, as an adult, am not, sovereign over my own consciousness, then I'm absolutely not sovereign over anything. I can't claim any kind of freedom at all. And what has happened over the last 40 or 50 years under the disguise of the war on drugs is that we have been persuaded to hand over the keys of our consciousness to the state. The most precious, the most intimate, the most sapient part of ourselves, the state now has the keys. And furthermore, they've persuaded us that that's in our interests. This is a very dangerous situation. Funded with our money, our taxpayers' money, there has been 40 years of programming, more than 40 years on this subject, to make us all develop a kind of aversion, a fear, a hatred, a horror of drugs. And it's just fundamentally wrong in so many ways. Look, quite a number of illegal drugs are actually really bad and really dangerous, and they will totally fuck you up in all kinds of ways. But I believe that the sovereignty of the adult over his or her own body and his or her own mind trumps everything else. Sure. And we must have the right to make our mistakes. Yes. We already have laws in our society for punishing bad behavior. If somebody on drugs goes out and gets in somebody else's face and causes them trouble, we already have laws to deal with that. We don't need new laws that control our consciousness and rigidly place it in a prison and actually place us in prison. If that's what you want to do, if that's your adult decision, that's your choice. What does liberty mean if it doesn't mean that? It's led to the creation of huge armed bureaucracies who have the right to break into our homes, smash down our doors, humiliate us in every possible way, ruin our lives with criminal records, and all because what? We're smoking some natural herb which affects our own consciousness in some way. So again, I say, if we get into the faces of others, the state may have a role to play, and it does, and it already has elaborate rules for dealing with that. But for the state to have transgressed the consciousness of free sovereign adults is a grotesque abuse of human rights. And it doesn't work. This is the other thing. If the state could turn around and say, the war on drugs has worked, we have reduced the consumption of this, that, it's not true. They haven't reduced the consumption of any drugs. The consumption of all illegal drugs has gone up. If the state was really interested in helping us, this is how the war on drugs is presented. We're concerned about your health, so we're going to send you to prison. We're concerned about the harm this drug is doing to you, so we're going to send you to prison. What's more harmful, the harm the drug is doing or being sent to prison? It seems to me pretty obvious that the being sent to prison is a much more harmful thing that's being done. If the state was really concerned about harm, then the solution is not to criminalize people for taking drugs. The solution is to present them with very good information which they believe. Part of the problem is that the state has become to be regarded as so corrupt that any message emanating from the state about drugs is not believed anymore, completely disbelieved. Once again, we come to this issue of adult sovereignty over consciousness. And our right also to make mistakes with our own body, if we do that. That's what I believe we're here on this earth to learn and to grow and to develop. And we have to have adult responsibility to do that.
There's like 1,000 different things that marijuana would fix that pharmaceutical drugs right now are prescribed for. And it would cost the pharmaceutical companies billions and billions of dollars every year. If marijuana was made illegal, it would cost alcohol companies. When you see those commercials, like those, the talking dog, the pot commercial.
Yeah.
I wish you wouldn't smoke weed. Those are sponsored by Partnership for a Drug-Free America. Mm-hmm. Partnership for a Drug-Free America is funded by alcohol companies. I mean, it's hilarious.
Really?
Yeah, and alcohol's a drug.
Yeah.
But it's a drug that's government sanctioned, and it's like, have you ever meet someone, they're like, I don't do drugs. Meanwhile, they're smoking and they have a beer in their hand. What are you doing right now, douche? You know, it's like, just because it has a label and a, you know, a barcode and you can scan it doesn't mean it's a drug. In 1935, they came out with a machine called the decorticator. And what a decorticator is, it allows you to effectively and economically effectively process hemp fiber. Because before they used to use slavery. And when slavery was abolished in 1865, they had no means of effectively producing this pulp like, you know, it would be economically effective. So more people were using cotton. But the Declaration of Independence was printed on hemp. The parachute that George Bush Sr. used to parachute in World War II, that was made out of hemp. Hemp had huge industrial uses. It was just very difficult to process. And so they came out with this machine called a decorticator, and it allowed them to really effectively produce it. And then Popular Science had this cover that said, hemp, the new billion-dollar product, and everyone was going to start using hemp for paper, for textiles. And William Randolph Hearst, who owned all these newspapers, and on top of that, owned all these paper mills, it was going to cost him millions of dollars to convert over to hemp. So instead, he started printing stories in his paper about some new drug called marijuana. And marijuana wasn't even a slang term for cannabis. Marijuana was used to describe a type of Mexican wild tobacco, completely unrelated. So they called it marijuana, and they said, this is how they got it illegal. They said, people are smoking it, and blacks and Mexicans are raping white women. So Congress outlawed this new drug, not even knowing they were outlawing hemp. They had no idea, which hemp had been in use for thousands and thousands of years. And so then they came out with all these videos, or these movies rather, like Reefer Madness and all these propaganda films, and it was all just to get people to think that there's something wrong with this one. It was totally economic. That's all it is.
So no one has ever died from pot. I mean, I know a little bit about it.
No one has died from pot in over 10,000 years of use. 400,000 people every year die directly, in this country alone, directly from use of cigarettes. No one's ever died from pot, ever. But it's illegal. And you're not going to live forever, all right? You're going to live and you're going to die, and everybody is. We're all temporary beings going through this life, and, you know, who are you to tell other people what they can and can't do? And people are like, oh, pot makes you a loser, pot makes you lazy. No, you're a loser and you're lazy. And if you smoke pot, you're a, you know, pot-smoking lazy loser. It doesn't mean pot makes you a loser.
I thought the same thing. You know, I didn't start smoking pot until about 5 years ago. I thought pot made you stupid. You know, I bought into it just as much as anybody did. I realized when I was like 30 years old that I was tricked. I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. People say, well, you can abuse marijuana. Well, shit, you can abuse cheeseburgers too. You know, you don't go around closing Burger King because you can abuse something. I can take a fucking fork and jam it in my eyeballs. That mean forks should be illegal? You know, I could jump off a bridge. Should we outlaw bridges? Let's nerf the world. In 10,000 years of known use of marijuana, there's never been a single death attributed to marijuana. There's 400,000 deaths in America alone every year that are directly attributed to tobacco. How many people in this country alone are addicted to antidepressants? How many people who are on antidepressants really have imbalances, and how many of them just got off of a bad relationship and they're depressed? The people that have personality problems and the people that are going to be lazy and going to lose their job, they're going to lose their job anyway. They're not losing their job because of marijuana. That's just a lie.